At 39 years old, Sophia Carter had achieved what many would consider the pinnacle of success in the competitive world of private aviation. As the CEO and owner of Carter Aviation, one of North America's largest private jet charter companies, Sophia's journey was nothing short of extraordinary. Her fleet boasted over 30 state-of-the-art aircraft, and her operations spanned 12 major cities across the continent. Yet, what truly set Sophia apart was not just her impressive achievements, but her grounded personality and unwavering dedication to her roots. On a typical day, Sophia could easily have opted for luxury chauffeured rides in a company-provided car, designer outfits, and a team of assistants to handle every detail of her life. Instead, she preferred simplicity. Driving herself in her well-maintained, modest Honda Accord, she embodied a rare blend of humility and practicality. For Sophia, success was not about flaunting wealth, but about staying true to the values instilled in her by her hard-working family. Family was the cornerstone of Sophia's life. Despite her busy schedule, she prioritized spending time with her parents and siblings back in their cozy Atlanta home. Every Sunday, without fail, she joined her family for a hearty dinner prepared by her mother, featuring her favorite Southern dishes. These moments grounded her, reminding her of where she came from and why she worked so hard. Sophia's professional journey was equally inspiring. She had started her career 15 years earlier as a junior accountant for a small charter company. Through sheer determination, sharp business acumen, and a love for aviation, she climbed the ranks. Eventually, she took over the struggling company, rebranded it as Carter Aviation, and transformed it into a powerhouse in the industry. Her personal touch could be seen in every detail, from the sleek design of the company's signature jets to the meticulous training programs she implemented for her staff. Despite her accomplishments, Sophia never saw herself as different from her employees or clients. She believed in leading by example, whether it meant following the same security protocols at her terminals or dressing casually for long business trips. On this particular evening at Los Angeles International Airport, Sophia wore a simple pair of black trousers, a comfortable blue blouse, and practical shoes. Her natural hair was styled neatly, and her only jewelry was a pair of pearl earrings passed down from her grandmother, an unstated nod to her family heritage. As she walked through the terminal carrying her black rolling suitcase and laptop bag, Sophia reflected on her incredible journey. Her rise to success was a testament to hard work and perseverance, and she never allowed her achievements to overshadow the importance of treating everyone with respect. Little did she know, the night ahead would put those values to the ultimate test. Arriving at the private aviation terminal at Los Angeles International Airport, Sophia Carter walked confidently toward the entrance, a rolling suitcase trailing behind her. Dressed in black trousers, a comfortable blue blouse, and practical shoes, she cut a casual yet professional figure. Her natural hair was styled neatly, and her demeanor was calm, a testament to years of experience in navigating the aviation industry she had come to dominate. However, this evening would take an unexpected turn. As Sophia reached the security desk, a new guard on duty, Richard Coleman, immediately took notice. Standing stiffly behind the desk, he eyed her with suspicion. Without letting her speak, he raised a hand in a halting motion. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said loudly, his voice echoing through the terminal. "The main terminal's cleaning staff entrance is on the other side of the airport. This is a private facility." Sophia blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his assumption. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she began, her voice even and polite. "I'm here for my flight." But Coleman's stance only grew firmer. "You're not allowed to wander around here," he interrupted, his tone dripping with authority. "This area is restricted to passengers only. Cleaning crew and other staff need to use the designated entrance." Sophia took a deep breath, maintaining her composure as she reached for her ID and access card, items she always carried. "Sir, I'm a passenger. If you'll just let me show you." "Ma'am, I need you to leave now," Coleman interjected, raising his voice further. I can't have you disturbing our high-profile clients." He gestured toward other passengers in the terminal, many of whom were dressed in expensive suits and surrounded by assistants. A few had paused to observe the scene unfolding, some even pulling out their phones to record. Sophia felt the familiar sting of being unfairly judged, a situation she had encountered more times than she cared to count. Her status as the owner of Carter Aviation, one of the largest private jet companies in the country, was clearly far from this guard's mind. Before she could explain further, an older woman in a pilot's uniform approached. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her tone measured but firm. "I'm handling it," Coleman replied curtly. "This woman claims she's a passenger, but she obviously isn't." As more onlookers gathered and whispers spread, Sophia remained composed, knowing this incident was spiraling out of control. Little did Coleman know he was speaking to the very person who owned the company whose logo adorned the jet parked outside. The situation at the private terminal escalated quickly. Richard Coleman, the new security guard, stood his ground, misinterpreting every polite attempt Sophia Carter made to clarify her presence. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again," he said, raising his voice further. "This is a private facility, and you're not authorized to be here. If you don't leave immediately, I'll have to involve security backup." Sophia, calm but visibly annoyed, replied firmly, "I've tried to explain, but you're not listening. I am a passenger, and I have every right to be here. Please, allow me to show my credentials." Instead of reconsidering, Coleman reached for his radio with an exaggerated flourish. Pressing the button, he announced loudly, "Security backup needed at the main entrance. Uncooperative individual refusing to leave. Possible trespassing." His booming voice echoed through the terminal, turning more heads as passengers paused to watch the drama unfold. Sophia remained composed but couldn't help noticing the murmurs spreading among the onlookers. Some were whispering among themselves, others smirking at what they assumed was a misunderstanding between a worker and airport security. A few even began recording the scene on their phones, the glint of camera lenses catching the terminal's soft lighting. Nearby, an impeccably dressed businessman in a tailored suit leaned against a wall, watching with mild amusement. "Huh, it's always something with these types," he muttered under his breath to a colleague, loud enough for Sophia to hear. She chose to ignore the comment, focusing instead on handling Coleman's misplaced authority with dignity. Moments later, 2 additional security guards arrived, jogging briskly toward the scene. Their heavy boots squeaked against the polished floor. As they approached, they took in the sight. A poised woman standing quietly by her luggage, facing an overly assertive guard who appeared to be ready for a confrontation. Their confused expressions betrayed their realization that this emergency might not be what they had expected. "Ma'am," one of the new guards, Officer Johnson, began in a professional tone. Can you explain what's going on?" Before Sophia could respond, Coleman interrupted, clearly relishing his self-assigned role as enforcer. "I already told you she's trespassing, claims she's a passenger, but I don't buy it. I've been in this job long enough to spot someone who doesn't belong." His tone was dripping with condescension. Sophia took a slow, steadying breath. She could feel the weight of countless eyes on her now. Some passengers were openly laughing, while others simply observed with curiosity. She caught sight of a young woman holding her phone aloft, capturing the entire interaction. Sophia had dealt with this type of prejudice before, but she couldn't shake the sting of the public nature of this particular humiliation. As the tension rose, a man in a crisp suit emerged from the offices on the far side of the terminal. It was Mr. Thompson, the terminal manager. His hurried steps and furrowed brow made it clear that he sensed something was amiss. From the distance, he caught a glimpse of Sophia and immediately recognized her. His eyes widened in alarm as he realized who Coleman was confronting. "Stop this at once," Mr. Thompson called out, his voice ringing across the terminal. But Coleman, seemingly too engrossed in his performance, ignored the command. "I have this under control, sir," Coleman said dismissively, not even turning to look at Thompson. "This woman needs to leave, or we'll have to remove her by force." Sophia, observing Thompson's approach, gave him a small shake of her head, silently asking him to hold off for a moment. She wanted to see how far Coleman would take this. Meanwhile, the crowd continued to grow, their murmurs louder now, with some spectators speculating aloud about what was happening. The businessman who had smirked earlier now stood with arms crossed, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Sophia glanced at her watch. Her flight was scheduled to depart in less than 30 minutes, and every second spent on this pointless interaction was eating into her precious time. Yet, she remained calm, her expression betraying none of her frustration. As Mr. Thompson finally reached the group, he pushed his way past the two backup guards and stood directly in front of Coleman. "Do you have any idea who this is?" he asked sharply, his tone laced with disbelief and anger. Coleman frowned, clearly confused. "She said she's a passenger, but look at her," he replied defensively, gesturing towards Sophia. "I've seen pictures of Miss Carter in the company newsletter. This can't be her." At that moment, Sophia calmly reached into her bag and pulled out her ID and credentials, along with a folder containing ownership documents for Carter Aviation. Handing them to Thompson, she said, "Perhaps this will clear up the misunderstanding." Thompson didn't even glance at the papers. He already knew exactly who Sophia was. Turning to Coleman, his face reddened with fury, he snapped, "You've just spent the last 15 minutes disrespecting the CEO of this entire company." The weight of Thompson's words sank in like a stone. Coleman's face turned pale as he took a shaky step back. The two backup guards exchanged awkward glances, stepping away from the scene, clearly unwilling to be associated with Coleman's blunder. The once smirking businessman now looked visibly uncomfortable, shifting on his feet as the tide of the crowd's energy turned against Coleman. Sophia looked around, her expression calm but resolute. The murmurs of the crowd grew quieter as realization dawned on more and more onlookers. She locked eyes with Coleman, who now stood frozen in place, his mouth opening and closing as though trying to find the words to apologize. "I've encountered situations like this before," Sophia said evenly, addressing not just Coleman, but the entire room. "But what's new is how quickly assumptions were made and how far this was allowed to go before anyone stopped to think." Coleman's hands trembled as he reached for the radio on his belt, fumbling and dropping it to the floor. Miss Carter, I... He stammered, but his voice faltered. Sophia held up a hand to stop him. "Let's not make this worse," she said quietly. Turning to Thompson, she added, "We'll discuss this later." With that, the tension in the terminal broke. Thompson began issuing orders to the staff, and the crowd started to disperse, their curiosity satisfied. Many of them still held their phones, no doubt preparing to share their recordings of the incident online. As Sophia finally headed toward the terminal gate, she could hear Thompson berating Coleman behind her. She didn't look back, knowing this incident would have lasting repercussions, not just for Coleman, but for how her company handled security and training in the future. What had started as a simple misunderstanding would soon grow into a pivotal moment of change for Carter Aviation and the entire private aviation industry. After what felt like an eternity of heated words and assumptions, Sophia Carter decided it was time to end the farce. She had remained calm through Richard Coleman's condescending remarks, his dismissive gestures, and his unnecessary radio calls for backup. But now, with time slipping away and the situation spiraling further out of control, she reached into her bag and pulled out the items that would put an end to the ordeal: her ID card, access credentials, and a folder containing documents that clearly established her as the CEO and owner of Carter Aviation. Sophia held the documents in front of her, her expression composed but firm. "Perhaps this will clear up the misunderstanding," she said, her voice carrying just enough edge to make the weight of her authority undeniable. Mr. Thompson, the terminal manager, who had arrived moments earlier, didn't even need to look at the documents to know who she was. His face flushed with embarrassment as he turned to Coleman. "Do you have any idea who you've been talking to?" Thompson's voice was sharp, laced with both anger and disbelief. Coleman, still oblivious, frowned and glanced at the documents in Sophia's hand. "She said she's a passenger," he muttered defensively, gesturing vaguely toward her. "But I've seen pictures of Sophia Carter in company emails. This can't be her. She—" His words faltered as his gaze landed on her ID card. There, in bold print, was her name, Sophia Carter, CEO of Carter Aviation. Below it was her photograph, unmistakably the same woman standing before him. The realization hit him like a freight train. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The confident, authoritative demeanor he had displayed so brazenly earlier evaporated in an instant. His face turned a shade of pale that almost matched his uniform shirt as the enormity of his mistake sank in. He had not only disrespected a passenger, but the very owner of the company he worked for, the boss of his boss's boss. Around them, the crowd that had gathered to watch the scene began to react. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the terminal as the truth of Sophia's identity became apparent. Some passengers lowered their phones, suddenly realizing the seriousness of what they had been recording. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances, clearly stunned by the unexpected twist. Coleman stammered, taking a step back. He reached up as though to adjust his crooked badge, but his hands were trembling too much to manage it. His earlier bravado and sense of authority had crumbled completely. Sophia, meanwhile, remained calm. She had dealt with prejudice and assumptions many times in her career, but this particular incident was unlike anything she had experienced. The public nature of it, combined with the outright disrespect from a staff member she had entrusted to represent her company, struck a nerve. However, she kept her emotions in check. She knew this moment was bigger than just her or Coleman. Before Coleman could stutter out another excuse, Thompson stepped forward, his tone now a mix of apologetic and authoritative. "Miss Carter, I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for this incident," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is completely unexcusable. Mr. Coleman is new, but that's no excuse for his behavior." Sophia held up a hand to stop him. "Enough, Mr. Thompson," she said calmly. "Let's address this later. Right now, I'd like to ensure I make my flight on time." Thompson nodded quickly, stepping aside to let her through. He shot a pointed glare at Coleman, who seemed to shrink into himself. The other two security guards, who had arrived as backup, took a step away from Coleman, clearly wanting to dissociate themselves from his mistake. One even removed his hat and offered Sophia a small nod of respect. As Sophia passed by, the once smirking businessman in the tailored suit approached, looking sheepish. "Miss Carter," he began, his tone deferential, "I had no idea. I mean, what happened here was completely unacceptable. If you'd like, I can provide a statement about what I witnessed." Sophia gave him a polite but curt nod. "Thank you," she said, not breaking her stride. As she finally made her way toward the gate, the crowd of onlookers parted respectfully to let her through. Employees who recognized her greeted her warmly, while those who didn't stared in stunned silence, clearly piecing together what had happened. Behind her, Coleman stood frozen, gripping the edge of the security desk for support. His mind raced with the realization that the woman he had dismissed so callously wasn't just another passenger. She was the person who signed the checks that paid his salary. As Sophia disappeared from view, he heard Thompson's sharp voice cutting through his daze. We will have a very long conversation about this tomorrow morning. Be ready." Sophia knew the incident wasn't over. The ripple effects would extend far beyond the terminal that night, reshaping policies and attitudes within her company, and possibly the private aviation industry as a whole. For now, though, she focused on the journey ahead, knowing that this experience would only fuel her commitment to change. Within hours of the confrontation at the terminal, videos of the incident flooded social media. Clips capturing the security guard's disrespectful treatment of Sophia Carter, followed by the shocking revelation of her identity as the CEO of Carter Aviation, quickly went viral. Outrage spread like wildfire. Hashtags like Private Jet Prejudice and Carter Aviation trended nationwide, and assumptions based on appearance. News outlets picked up the story and civil rights organizations reached out, offering their support and amplifying the conversation. Sophia watched the situation unfold online with a heavy heart. While she had faced bias and prejudice countless times throughout her career, this incident struck a deeper chord because of how public it had become. She reflected on the moments that had shaped her journey from being dismissed in meetings to having her capabilities questioned as a young professional in aviation. These experiences had driven her to build a company that valued diversity and respect. But the incident was a stark reminder of how far society still had to go. Rather than letting anger consume her, Sophia chose to channel the momentum into action. She spent the following evening drafting a detailed memo to her leadership team, outlining her vision for a comprehensive training program addressing bias and discrimination. "This isn't just about one incident," she wrote. "It's about creating an environment where every individual, regardless of their background, is treated with dignity and respect." By the time she sat down at her desk the next morning, hundreds of emails and messages had poured in. Some were offers of support, others were stories from people who had faced similar situations. Sophia knew the moment was bigger than her. It was an opportunity to spark meaningful change, not just within her company, but across the entire private aviation industry. Richard Coleman sat nervously in the lobby of Carter Aviation's headquarters, clutching his hat with trembling hands. The events of the previous day had turned his world upside down. He had gone home to find his phone inundated with messages, most of them scolding him for his behavior. His mother, disappointed, left a voicemail saying, "We need to talk." His sister called him in tears, unable to believe the man in the viral video was her brother. He hadn't slept. The weight of his actions and the global backlash hung over him like a storm cloud. Now, sitting outside Sophia Carter's office, Coleman wasn't sure what to expect. He had already mentally prepared himself for termination. "I deserve it," he thought, replaying the incident in his head for the 100th time. But when Sophia's assistant invited him in, his nerves spiked anew. Inside, Sophia sat at her desk, her demeanor calm but firm. Across from her was Mr. Thompson, the terminal manager, looking equally tense. As Coleman took his seat, Sophia studied him for a moment before speaking. "Mr. Coleman," she began, her voice steady but serious, "do you understand the gravity of what happened yesterday?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am deeply, truly sorry. I've spent the whole night thinking about what I did, and I'm ashamed. I didn't mean to act that way. I made a terrible mistake." Sophia listened quietly, letting him speak. His remorse seemed genuine, but she wasn't here just for apologies. "Mr. Coleman," she said after a pause, "growing up in Atlanta, my parents taught me to judge people by how they treat others, not by how they look, what they wear, or where they come from. Yesterday, you judged me based solely on the presumptions. You dismissed me, ignored my attempts to explain, and escalated the situation unnecessarily." Coleman nodded, his head hanging low. "I know," he admitted. "I didn't stop to think. I just assumed. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was wrong. Completely wrong." The room fell silent for a moment. Through the window, they could see another news van pulling up outside, part of the media frenzy still surrounding the viral story. Coleman shifted uncomfortably in his seat, fully expecting Sophia's next words to end his career. But instead, she surprised him. "The easy thing to do would be to fire you," she said, leaning forward. "It would certainly satisfy a lot of people online, but I don't believe that's the best solution. Not for you, not for me, and not for this company." Coleman looked up, his eyes wide with shock. "You're not firing me?" "No," Sophia said firmly, "because this incident is bigger than just you. What happened yesterday highlighted a systemic issue, bias, assumptions, and a lack of understanding. Firing you might resolve public anger temporarily, but it won't fix the underlying problem. What I want to know is, are you willing to take responsibility and help me change this?" "I'll do whatever it takes," Coleman said quickly. "Anything. I want to make this right." Sophia nodded. "Good. Because I'm launching a new training program for all Carter Aviation employees, starting with our security teams. It will address unconscious bias, respectful customer interactions, and real-world scenarios like the one we faced yesterday. And I want you to be part of it." "Me?" Coleman asked, stunned. "Why would you want me involved after what I did?" "Because your mistake can teach others," Sophia explained. "You've experienced firsthand how damaging assumptions can be. You've also seen the consequences for yourself, for me, and for the company. That perspective will be invaluable in creating something meaningful. The question is, are you willing to face your actions head-on and help prevent others from repeating them?" Coleman hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, ma'am. I want to make a difference. I don't want anyone else to feel the way you did because of someone like me." Sophia leaned back, satisfied with his response. "Good. You'll be working closely with Mr. Thompson and me to develop the program. It won't be easy. You'll have to revisit what happened and face a lot of scrutiny. But if you're serious about making this right, it's a start." Thompson, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Miss Carter, this program could really set a new standard in the industry. I think involving Mr. Coleman is the right call." Sophia smiled faintly. "I hope so. Real change comes from education, not just punishment." She stood and extended her hand toward Coleman, who shook it hesitantly. "This is your opportunity to turn a mistake into something meaningful, Mr. Coleman," she said. "Don't waste it." As Coleman left the office, a mix of relief and determination washed over him. For the first time since the incident, he felt a glimmer of hope not just for his future, but for the chance to make amends and contribute to lasting change. Following the fallout from the terminal incident, Sophia Carter moved swiftly to ensure meaningful change within Carter Aviation. Determined to turn a moment of bias and humiliation into a lesson for the entire industry, she began developing a comprehensive training program aimed at addressing unconscious bias, promoting inclusivity, and improving customer service across all levels of her company. The program, aptly named Inclusive Excellence, was designed to be both practical and transformative. Sophia envisioned it as more than just a box-checking exercise. It would include real-world scenarios, role-playing activities, and personal stories that highlighted the impact of bias in the workplace. She insisted that the training be mandatory for all employees, starting with the security teams, who were often the first point of contact for passengers. Recognizing the power of personal accountability, Sophia invited Richard Coleman, the security guard whose actions had sparked the viral incident, to take an active role in the program. Initially, Coleman hesitated. The memory of his public mistake and the backlash that followed was still fresh, and he wasn't sure he was ready to relive it. However, Sophia believed his involvement would add a critical layer of authenticity to the training. "Your mistake has already been seen by millions," Sophia told him during one of their planning meetings. "Now you have a chance to show them and our team that you've learned from it. By sharing your story, you can help others recognize and confront their own biases before they lead to similar incidents. Motivated by a deep desire to make amends, Coleman agreed. Over the next several weeks, he worked closely with Sophia and her team to shape the program. Together, they crafted modules that not only addressed the technical aspects of security protocols, but also focused on fostering empathy and understanding. Coleman's own story became a centerpiece of the training, with the now infamous video of the incident serving as a starting point for discussions about assumptions and their consequences. The program's rollout began with a pilot group of security personnel. In the opening session, Coleman stood before a room of his peers, visibly nervous but determined. "This is me," he said, playing the video clip of the confrontation with Sophia. The room grew quiet as attendees watched, many shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm not proud of what you just saw," Coleman admitted once the video ended. "But I'm here today because I want to make sure no one else makes the same mistake I did. That starts with understanding why it happened and how we can do better." His candid acknowledgement of his actions resonated with the group. What could have been an awkward or defensive moment became a powerful lesson in accountability. As the training continued, Coleman shared how the experience had forced him to confront his own unconscious biases and assumptions. His vulnerability, combined with Sophia's leadership, created an atmosphere of trust and openness. The program also included practical exercises. Trainees participated in role-playing scenarios designed to mirror real-life situations they might encounter at the terminal. In one session, they were asked to interact with actors portraying passengers of diverse backgrounds, practicing how to balance security protocols with respect and empathy. Feedback from these exercises was immediate and constructive, helping participants see where their biases might influence their actions. Sophia and her team also introduced a wall of assumptions, a space where trainees could anonymously write down moments when they had judged someone unfairly or been judged themselves. The wall quickly filled with stories, some humorous, others deeply personal, that underscored how common and harmful assumptions could be. As the program progressed, its impact became evident. Employees reported feeling more confident in their roles and more aware of how their actions affected others. Complaints about security procedures dropped significantly, and passengers began leaving positive feedback about the improved customer experience at Carter Aviation terminals. Coleman, once the subject of ridicule and anger, became a respected figure within the company. His willingness to face his mistakes head-on and use them as a tool for education earned him the admiration of his colleagues. By the third month of the program, he had helped train over 200 security personnel across multiple locations and had even begun mentoring new hires. Sophia watched the progress with pride. The program was not only changing the culture within Carter Aviation, but was also attracting attention from the broader aviation industry. Several competing companies reached out, expressing interest in adopting similar training initiatives. By turning a painful moment into an opportunity for growth, Sophia and Coleman had demonstrated that real change was possible when leaders prioritized education, empathy, and accountability. The Inclusive Excellence program was just the beginning, but its early success signaled a brighter, more equitable future for the industry. In just 3 months, Sophia Carter's Inclusive Excellence program had already begun to transform Carter Aviation. Over 200 security personnel across multiple locations participated in the training, which tackled unconscious bias, respectful communication, and customer-centered security protocols. The results were remarkable. Passenger complaints about security interactions dropped by 70%, and customer satisfaction ratings rose by 45%. These improvements were tangible proof of the program's success and the commitment of the team behind it. A key figure in this transformation was Richard Coleman. Once at the center of a viral controversy, Coleman had embraced his role in the program with humility and determination. Standing in front of new trainees, he used his own mistakes as a powerful teaching tool. Each session began with a now familiar video clip of his confrontation with Sophia, followed by his candid reflection on what he had learned. "I'm not proud of the person you see in that video," Coleman would say to the trainees, his tone both sincere and instructive, "but I'm proud of the person I've become since then, and I hope my story helps you avoid the same missteps." Coleman's authenticity and willingness to share his journey resonated deeply with participants. His passion for the program turned him into an unlikely leader within the company, earning him respect from colleagues who once viewed him with skepticism. Many remarked on how his humility and growth inspired them to examine their own biases more closely. Beyond the individual impact, the program began to reshape Carter Aviation's workplace culture. Employees reported feeling more empowered to approach their roles with empathy and professionalism, while passengers noted the noticeable shift in how they were treated. Feedback poured in, with passengers expressing appreciation for the respect and courtesy shown by the security staff. Sophia observed the ripple effects with pride, knowing this was only the beginning. The program's early success drew attention from other aviation companies, some of which began discussions about adopting similar training. What had started as a painful incident had grown into a movement for positive change, proving that growth and redemption could lead to lasting industry-wide transformation. 3 months after its launch, Sophia Carter presented the Inclusive Excellence Program at the National Aviation Industry Conference in Chicago, addressing a packed ballroom of over 500 industry leaders. With the spotlight firmly on her, Sophia shared the program's transformative impact on Carter Aviation, emphasizing its potential to revolutionize the private aviation industry. "Since implementing inclusive excellence," she began, "we've seen a 70% reduction in passenger complaints about security interactions and a 45% increase in customer satisfaction across all our terminals." The audience erupted in applause, impressed by the tangible results. Sophia explained how the program tackled unconscious bias and emphasized respectful, empathetic customer interactions, setting a new standard for security and service in aviation. A key part of her presentation was the personal story behind the program's creation. Without naming names, she detailed the now viral incident that served as the program's catalyst, framing it as a turning point for her company. She highlighted how mistakes, when acknowledged and addressed with sincerity, could lead to powerful change. To underscore this point, Sophia called Richard Coleman to the stage. The audience, recognizing him from the viral video, whispered in surprise, but Coleman walked confidently to the podium. "Mr. Coleman was at the center of that incident," Sophia said, her tone firm yet compassionate. "Today, he's a leader of this program, training hundreds of employees and ensuring no one else makes the same mistake." Coleman spoke briefly, sharing his journey from regret to redemption. His humility and dedication resonated deeply, leaving a lasting impression on the audience. Sophia concluded by announcing the nationwide rollout of the Inclusive Excellence Program. 10 major aviation companies had already signed on and more were in discussions to adopt the training. "Our industry is changing," she said, "and with it, our approach to security and service must evolve." The standing ovation that followed marked not just the success of the program, but the beginning of a cultural shift within the aviation industry. Richard Coleman's transformation from a security guard at the center of a viral controversy to a respected leader within Carter Aviation became a powerful story of growth and redemption. Now a key figure in the Inclusive Excellence training program, Coleman used his own mistakes to inspire change, teaching others how unconscious bias could cloud judgment and lead to unfair treatment. Leading the program with humility and passion, Coleman started each session by showing the viral video of his confrontation with Sophia Carter. Instead of avoiding his past, he embraced it as a learning opportunity. "This moment doesn't define who I am," he often told trainees, "but what I've done since then does." His sincerity and willingness to confront his errors resonated deeply with participants. Over time, Coleman earned the respect of his peers and became an influential voice in the company. His story, once a cautionary tale, turned into an example of accountability and the potential for meaningful change. Coleman's leadership not only reshaped Carter Aviation's culture, but also inspired others in the industry to address bias with honesty and determination. The incident at Carter Aviation's terminal became a powerful catalyst for systemic change in the private aviation industry. What began as a moment of prejudice and misunderstanding evolved into an opportunity for growth and transformation, thanks to Sophia Carter's leadership and vision. Instead of focusing solely on punishment, Sophia used the incident to highlight the importance of education, empathy, and accountability. Through the development and implementation of the Inclusive Excellence Program, the company addressed unconscious bias, improved customer service, and set a new standard for professionalism in aviation. Richard Coleman's journey from mistake to redemption demonstrated how even the worst errors could spark meaningful change. This initiative not only reshaped Carter Aviation's workplace culture, but inspired an industry-wide movement, proving that lessons learned from adversity can drive progress.